greatest of introductions. The proper thing to say eludes me because there are too many possibilities. With that being said, for simplicity's sake, hi, my name's Justin. I'm from a place where there's way too much concrete and way too little grass. Growing up, I watched a lot, and I mean a lot, of TV. I didn't have any brothers or sisters, and as a single parent, my mom was busy most of the time. So more often than not, it was just me and the TV. I'd sit and watch for hours. I probably watched everything on there at one point or another, but one movie really stuck out to me. It was called Field of Dreams. It was an old Kevin Costner flick about a farmer. For whatever reason, something about that movie spoke to me. Being from the city, I'd never even seen the country. It was beautiful to me, a peaceful place, so much green around. No loud sirens, no car horns honking all day, and people would lend you the coat off their backs if you needed it, or at least that's how I saw it. Some people love being an only child, but personally, I hated it. Every year around Christmas, I'd ask my mom for a dog to play with, and she'd always give me the same answer. You don't know how to take care of a dog, and we don't have the space. She'd say one day we were going to have a house with a big yard, and then she'd give me a dog. But that day never came. She died when I was 17. I've been on my own ever since. Well, not totally alone. As soon as I was able, I got a dog. He was half Australian Shepherd and half Sheltie. He basically looked like a mini version of Lassie. I tried to name him all these great creative names, but he wouldn't respond to any of them. The only thing he'd respond to was Puppy, so I named him Puppy. He had so much personality for such a little dog. He'd tilt his head to the side when I'd talk to him, with this look like he was trying so hard to understand me. He always slept at the foot of my bed, and he'd throw a fit any time I'd leave without him. He was honestly my best friend, the dog I'd wanted since I was little, but I longed for the day we could move out of the city. Even though it took hella long, eventually we did just that. We moved out to the country. It was honestly just like I'd always thought it'd be. Quiet, had beautiful views, and the most chill neighbors I've ever had. Just beyond my backyard was a forest, and beyond the forest were mountains. There's something about nature that just makes you feel peaceful, you know? Me and Puppy would go into those woods as often as possible, and while he'd be exploring, sniffing away and eating God knows what, I'd either be reading something, or, more often than not, I'd go along with him. He'd occasionally chase after squirrels, but that was usually about the extent of our activities out there. It was a cool day in late September, and we'd been in the woods for a few hours already. The sun was setting, and it was time to go home. As me and Puppy made our way out of the woods, we heard the sound of a snapping branch just off in the distance. We stopped in our tracks for a moment, trying to figure out what had made the sound, but we didn't hear anything. If you know anything about the forest, you know there are always some sounds, but now it had become deafeningly silent, which sent an icy chill down my spine. "Come on, let's go," I told Puppy, and we started up again. Within a few seconds, we could hear the sound of branches breaking again, not far from us. Something was following us. I'd already ruled out the possibility of it being a bear, because there were no bears in these woods. But whatever it was definitely tailing us, and was definitely a predator. We stopped again, listening. Suddenly, Puppy began growling and baring his teeth in the direction the sounds had come from. I had never seen him like this. He was ready to kill something. "Come on, Puppy, let's..." Before I finished, he bolted towards the sound. "Puppy, no! Come here!" It was too late. I ran after him, but he was too fast. I heard a snap and a whimper, followed by footsteps retreating. As Puppy's bloodied body came into my view, I felt my heart come into my throat. I dropped to my knees and scooped him into my arms, unable to stop my tears from falling onto his lifeless body. "Puppy! Puppy!" He looked as if his spine had been snapped in two. I felt for a pulse, but I already knew I wouldn't find one. Ah! I buried Puppy in my backyard that night. I called into work the next day and stayed home, just staring at the wall and crying mostly. That night, I pretty much screamed into my pillow and punched my bed until I fell asleep. Every day for the next week was pretty much a repeat of the first day. But after that week, I didn't have any tears left to cry. Only rage. I swore to kill whatever had gotten Puppy, which strangely enough, gave me a sense of relief, of purpose. The first thing I did was buy a 12-gauge shotgun and plenty of ammo, though I wasn't sure I'd need it. I was aware of the common predators in the area. Snakes, opossums, badgers. There was no way any of those could snap a dog in half like that. There had to be something else out there. A bear or something. Now armed, I went out to the woods the next day and sat, waiting to see something, anything, out of the ordinary. I waited until sundown, but there was nothing to see outside of the usual birds and squirrels. I repeated this almost every day over the next 3 months, with no luck. It was winter by then, and the bitter cold had left the forest eerily quiet, leaving me with only the thoughts of revenge in my head to keep me company. Then it hit me. My obsession with revenge had completely taken over my mind, and I'd slowly pushed away everyone who cared about me. I was painfully lonely. For a brief moment, that realization actually brought me peace. I guess because it was the first time I hadn't been so pissed off in literally months. I put the safety on my gun and decided to head back home, but just then, I heard a familiar sound. Twigs breaking beneath something heavy. I took the safety off my gun, a welcome distraction from the fear and anger that had suddenly gripped me, and made my way towards the sound. It was strange. I'd only hear it in harmony with my own steps, as if every time I took a step, whatever was there would take a step at the exact same moment. When I got to where it had seemingly come from, I found nothing out of the ordinary, but I could feel someone's eyes burning into the back of my skull, so I quickly turned around. For a brief moment, I could see the edge of what looked like a shoulder covered in fur, but something was off. It was the shoulder of something that was standing upright, and definitely not a bear. Bears' shoulders aren't really discernible from their torsos. This shoulder, however, was huge and broad, and judging from the height, the owner of it had to be at least 7 feet tall. It was hard to tell though, since I only caught a glimpse of it as it was slipping behind a tree. For a minute, I couldn't move. All I could do was stand there, frozen, trying to make sense of what I had just seen. After the initial shock wore off, an intense anger cascaded through my entire body, and even in the bitter cold, it felt like lava was coursing through my veins. I raised my gun and headed in the direction of the unknown creature, ready to pull the trigger, but whatever had been there before was now long gone. I searched the woods until it got dark, which was another hour at least, but there was no sign of anything out of the ordinary. That night I fell asleep on the couch and had left the blinds open, as I often did, a luxury of living out in the country since nobody's going to walk by. I woke up in the middle of the night with the strangest feeling. You know the feeling you get after waking up from a terrible nightmare? It was kind of like that. The feeling of dread. That's the best way I can describe it. It was such a strong feeling I couldn't even bring myself to close my eyes because something was wrong. I felt drawn to look towards the window, so I did. I could see a pair of red lights that seemed to be way too close. That didn't make much sense though, because there was no road visible from this particular window. Now keep in mind my TV had been the only source of light that was on, and my eyes had been adjusted to that light. I wanted to get a better look out the window to figure out what the red lights were coming from, so I turned the TV off. I rubbed my eyes and then looked towards the window again. The lights were gone. I said to myself that they must have been from a plane, but realized that they'd been way too close. My next guess was brake lights from a car, but that wouldn't be possible because, as I said, there's no road visible from that window, and my fence is a good 6 feet tall. I racked my brain trying to figure it out, but kept drawing a blank. After a while, I resolved to let it go and try to get some sleep. The next day, Dana flew down to visit. Dana's my best friend from back home. And did I mention she's the coolest chick ever? I mean, seriously, she probably pees standing up. Even though we only get to see each other a few times a year now, we always make the best memories when we do. These days, we usually keep it low-key. Netflix, pizza, and beer. With a side of good conversations, of course. As usual, we talked about any and everything under the sun. Work, family, God, her love life, my love life, or lack thereof. And somewhere along the line, I cracked. I broke down about Puppy. Pathetic, I know. And told her what I'd been doing. In true best friend fashion, she always knows just what to say. "Let it out," she said. I was waiting for that. "You have every right to be pissed, but look what this is doing to you. You're hanging out in the forest by yourself in the middle of this cold-ass winter with a shotgun like Elmer Fudd or something." I busted out laughing. These are thug tears, by the way. It was an inside joke. We both laughed. "I haven't done that much lately," I said. "What? Laugh?" "Yeah." I wiped away my tears. "See, that's why I need you out here." She responded exactly as I knew she would. That she was a city girl. "I know, Day. I know." "It was my fault." "What do you mean?" "When Puppy died, it was my fault. If I would have had him on a leash, he wouldn't have run off." "That's such bullshit." "What do you mean? You know that's not true. You love that dog more than anything. You took such good care of him. I don't know if anyone's ever treated a dog better. Anybody that knows you knows you would have given your life to save him if it came down to it. So don't you dare look at me and tell me it was your fault, because it wasn't. Look, as much as I support you in whatever you do, you have to let this go. It's eating you up inside." I could feel every ounce of rage I'd been suppressing welling up inside me. We sat there in silence for a few minutes, until we both fell asleep. She had to fly out the next morning, so we said our goodbyes, and then it was back into the woods for me. I was out there for 3 hours straight, contemplating whether to snack on the cookies or the potato chips I'd brought with me, when suddenly, I heard the familiar sound of twigs breaking in the distance. I readied my gun and made my way towards it, noting that the forest had fallen completely quiet. I was now in the area the sound had been coming from, but there was nothing out of the ordinary to see. I could, however, see some unusual tracks leading deeper into the woods. They looked somewhat human, but much bigger and more canine. I followed them for about half a mile until they just eventually stopped. It was as if whoever, or whatever, had made them had somehow vanished into thin air. I looked around carefully. There was nothing. All of a sudden, I got a powerful feeling that something was standing behind me. I could feel its hot breath on the back of my neck. Now, I've seen my share of scary movies, so I know what happens when someone hears something behind them and turns around slowly. I decided to turn around fast and hopefully startle whoever was behind me, but it didn't work. I found myself looking directly into a furry torso, which I then followed upward, all the way to the head, where I found menacing eyes staring into mine. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. The best way I can describe it is a mix between a wolf and a man. It had to have been at least 7 feet tall, and the most unnerving part was that it was standing on its hind legs. I was completely frozen, unable to even lift my gun for a few seconds. The only thing I could hear besides my own pounding heart in my ears was this thing's deep, heavy breathing, which sounded labored as if it had just finished running. It let out a deep, guttural growl, similar to the roar of a lion, that shook me literally to my bones. I lifted my gun, intending to shoot it, but before I could, it slapped it from my hands with such brutal force that it sent me flying into a tree 5 feet away. The impact of hitting the tree must have caused me to lose consciousness for a second, because I remember waking up, seeing this massive beast coming at me, and all I could do was run. I zigzagged through trees with this thing nearly on my heels, gaining on me every second. I ran as fast as I possibly could, but no matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't shake it. It lunged forward and hit me in the back, with a force that I swear could rival a truck, giving me whiplash and sending me flying into the ground. I rolled onto my back to see it walking up to me like a predator approaching its prey, and tried to get up, but I couldn't. I collapsed back to the ground every time I tried. All I could do was scoot myself backward, as this beast kept getting closer and closer to me. Suddenly, I hit my hand so hard on something that I jammed my finger and screamed in pain. I turned my head around to see that it was my shotgun. The creature was right up on me by this point, maybe 3 feet away. It leapt into the air intending to land on me, but in that instant, everything seemed to slow down, like it was in slow motion. I somehow grabbed my gun and fired before it landed on me, hitting it right in the abdomen. The shot sent it flying back, but it landed on its feet and ran at me again. I fired a second shot into its chest. That dropped it. As I stumbled over to the creature, I could see that it wasn't breathing. It had fallen onto its back and I was about to kick it. It reached out and grabbed my leg. I raised my gun and shot it again, and again, before it crumbled into a heap, dead. I had imagined how good I'd feel once I killed that bastard. But in actuality, I felt terrible. That night, I had a dream that I'd come home from work, and Puppy was inside waiting to greet me. He jumped into my arms and I held him like I always had. And then in a flash, he disappeared, and I was holding air. I started crying instantly, which woke me up because I was crying in real life. I must have laid there bawling my eyes out for half an hour before I was able to calm down. But suddenly, I got this moment of clarity. I realized that that dream was symbolic of me letting go. Not only of Puppy, but of my anger. I'm doing better now. I've taken all that energy that I was using to hate this creature and put it into forming a support group for people who've lost pets. Because pets aren't just animals, they're family. We meet once a week, and it's been life-changing to talk to other people that not only share what I've been through, but also to be able to help them by giving them a safe space to deal with their own grief, and ultimately, to heal. I've also forgiven that creature and myself for what happened to Puppy. I realize now that it wasn't my fault, and taking revenge didn't make me feel any better. Hell, it almost killed me. I guess what I'm saying is, don't blame yourself for the bad things that have happened in life. We tend to think some things are in our hands, when really, they're far beyond our control. So forgive yourself and that other person for what you or they did. Because unforgiveness is like a fire, and by holding on to it, it's you that gets burned.
jungle.